Hey there, I'm Emily, 28 years old, and I've been married to Mark for the past 3 years. We're expecting our first child, and we live in a cozy little house in a middle-class neighborhood. I used to work as a marketing executive, a job I absolutely loved. It was fast-paced, creative, and challenging, everything I thrived on. But when I got pregnant, Mark and I decided it would be best for me to take a break from work to focus on the pregnancy and get ready for the baby. Mark's been supportive, or at least he says he is. But I can't shake the feeling that he's started to see me differently since I stopped working. He's an accountant with a stable job, so he's taken on the role of the breadwinner without complaint. But sometimes I get this unsettling vibe from him, like he's beginning to buy into his mother's old-fashioned ideas about traditional gender roles. Sarah, my mother-in-law. She's quite the character, in her late 50s with a sharp tongue and a mountain of opinions that no one asked for. She's always had an issue with me, though she tries to hide it behind a fake smile and concerned advice. Sarah firmly believes that women should be submissive and dependent on their husbands, which is absurd. But Mark was raised to believe that his mom is always right. He's a total mama's boy and listens to her more than anyone else. I've tried talking to him about it, but he just brushes me off, saying I'm overthinking things. Maybe I am, but it's hard to ignore when Sarah is constantly around, pushing her outdated views on us. Thankfully, I have Linda, my best friend and my rock through all of this. Linda's a lawyer, sharp and independent. She's always there to listen and offer advice, which I really appreciate, especially since things with Sarah have been getting more tense lately. So that's the gist of my life right now. On the surface, everything seems pretty normal. I spend most of my days getting the nursery ready, making sure everything is perfect for the baby. I want this child to be born into a loving, warm home, despite the growing tension around here. I've been reflecting a lot on my career lately, how much I miss it, and how I worry that Sarah sees me as useless now that I'm just at home. One afternoon, it was one of those rare moments when the house was quiet, just the hum of the refrigerator and my thoughts for company. I was folding laundry in the living room, trying to distract myself from the anxiety creeping in about Sarah's upcoming visit. She never announced when she'd show up, but she always had a critique ready. Sure enough, the doorbell rang, and there she was, her eyes scanning the room like she was searching for something to criticize. "You know, Emily, it's a shame to see you like this, just wasting away at home," she said. I tried to keep my voice even. "Sarah, I'm pregnant, not incapacitated, and I'm only taking a break from work. But you're not contributing, are you? My son is the one bringing in all the money. What do you do all day?" I bit back a sharper retort, my hands tightening around a folded shirt. "I'm preparing for your grandchild, Sarah. That's hardly doing nothing." Her scoff felt like a slap. "Preparing? Looks more like you're lounging around. Mark works all day and you just spend his money." Before I could reply, she stormed upstairs. I heard drawers being pulled open and closet doors slamming. My heart raced as I followed her, only to find her tossing my clothes out the window and onto the lawn below. "My son's the breadwinner. You're useless," she yelled, throwing out another handful of my belongings. I stood there, speechless and shaking, as she stormed past me, her mission complete. The door slammed shut behind her, leaving a ringing silence. Mark came home to find my clothes scattered across the grass. I was still trying to process everything, struggling to find the words to explain, when he walked up, his face drawn into a frown. "Emily, why is all your stuff outside?" he asked. "Your mother," I managed to say, my voice choked. "She thinks I'm useless." Mark sighed, the sound deep and weary. "Look, Emily, Mom can be a bit much. But you have to admit, you've been home a lot. Maybe try to see things from her perspective," Mark said. The hurt his words caused was like nothing I felt before. "From her perspective? Mark," she threw my clothes outside. "How is that acceptable?" He was already shaking his head, ready to dismiss the gravity of it all. "She's stressed too. We need to be understanding." Understanding. The word echoed mockingly in my mind as he went to pick up my clothes. His actions more of an apology for his mother than support for me. Later, I called Linda, the tears I'd held back now free to fall. She threw my things out, Linda in front of everyone. And Mark he just took her side. Linda's voice was a fierce comfort. "Emily, this is not okay. You know that, right? You can't let her or Mark keep treating you this way." "What can I do? He's my husband." "And she's harassing you, Emily. This could have legal consequences for her. Harassment, Emily, remember that. Her words planted something within me, a small seed of resolve. I wiped my tears, my heart steadying. You're right, I need to do something. I can't live like this. Document everything, Linda advised. Texts, incidents, anything. It's not just for a potential case. You need to show Mark how serious this is. As we hung up, a plan began to form. Maybe Mark couldn't see the toxicity because he'd lived with it all his life. Maybe I needed to expose it, to drag it into the light where he couldn't ignore it. That night, I started writing everything down. Every incident, every cruel word Sarah had ever thrown at me. It was time for a change, and I was going to be the one to make it happen. I didn't know then just how deep the rot had set in or how hard it would be to carve it out. But I knew one thing for certain. I was done being the victim. Things got worse before they got any better. The whispers started small, just quiet murmurs I'd catch as I passed by the neighbors chatting in their yards. But soon those murmurs grew into full-blown rumors, the kind that make you feel like the walls are closing in. I heard from Sarah at Emily's just after Mark's money. She quit her job as soon as she got him to marry her. It's pretty clear she's just a gold digger. Hearing those words flung around so casually about me hurt more than I'd expected, but I wasn't about to let Sarah's poison spread without a fight. I knew I had to act. I needed concrete evidence that could put an end to all this. So I called Linda, and we hashed a plan. I'm going to invite Sarah over for tea. Think I can get her to show her true colors? Record everything. Linda's voice crackled over the phone, all business. We need her to admit her motives. So that's what I did. I set up my phone to record audio and invited Sarah over under the guise of clearing the air. When she arrived, her smile was all teeth and no warmth. I led her into the living room where the tea was already laid out and discreetly hit record on my phone. Sarah, I really want to understand why you've been so upset with me. She took a sip of her tea, eyeing me like a cat does a cornered mouse. Emily, it's simple. I think you're not right for my son. You're dragging him down, and frankly, I think you're using him. The casual venom in her voice made my stomach turn, but I needed more. Why would you say that, Sarah? Because it's true. I want what's best for Mark, and that's not you. I've been trying to show him the truth, hoping you'd just leave on your own. The confession was a cold splash of reality, but I had what I needed. That night, I played the recording for Mark, my heart hammering in my chest. His face paled as his mother's words filled the room, but instead of the support I craved, his next words splintered any trust left between us. Emily, why would you do this? It's like you're trying to manipulate me against my own mother. His accusation was a knife twist I hadn't anticipated. Mark, she admitted to trying to break us up. How can you not see what's happening? He shook his head, lost in his denial. I need some air, he muttered, leaving me alone with the shards of our fractured marriage. It was clear then, he would never stand with me, not really. With a heavy heart, I called Linda back. It's time. I want to file for harassment against Sarah, and I think I need to file for separation from Mark. Are you sure? Her voice was soft, tinged with sadness for me. Yes, it's the only way I can think of to save myself. As I hung up, the weight of my decision settled over me. I was about to change everything. But as I looked around the quiet house, I realized it was already far from the home I had hoped to build. A month later, the courtroom was silent, save for the soft shuffling of papers and the low murmurs of those present. Sitting next to Linda, I felt a mix of nerves and resolve as I watched Sarah across the room, her face set in a stubborn mask. Today, everything would come to light, and I clung to the hope that justice would see me through. Miss Johnson, you may present your evidence. The judge's steady voice echoed slightly in the high-ceilinged room. Linda stood, her presence commanding as she began to lay out the months of harassment, the recorded conversations, the testimonies from neighbors, and even the video of Sarah throwing my belongings out. Each piece of evidence felt like a weight lifting from my shoulders, her toxic words now serving to free me rather than bind me. Ladies and gentlemen, it's clear that Mrs. Walters' actions were deliberate and harmful, aimed at driving my client to a breaking point. Linda's voice was firm, her gaze sweeping the room. We seek a restraining order and damages for the severe emotional distress caused. Sarah's lawyer attempted to paint her as a concerned mother worried about her son's well-being. But the evidence spoke louder than his words. When Sarah took the stand, her usual confidence seemed to falter under the weight of her own admissions. I just wanted what was best for Mark. Her voice cracked slightly, but I could barely muster sympathy. She glanced at me, a mix of defiance and something else. Fear, perhaps. The judge took less time than I expected to make a decision. The court grants Miss Johnson a restraining order against Mrs. Walters. Furthermore, Mrs. Walters will pay damages for emotional distress. This case is closed. The gavel's fall was like a symphony to my ears. As we left the courthouse, Linda squeezed my shoulder. "You did it, Emily." I could only nod, feeling a chapter of my life closing, a painful but necessary end. The aftermath was swift. Mark's stance, or lack thereof, during the trial didn't go unnoticed. Neighbors who had once been friendly grew cold towards him, and whispers followed him in the streets. He tried to reach out to me one evening, standing awkwardly at my new apartment door. "I'm sorry, Emily. I should have seen it. Can we try again?" His words hung between us, but my heart had hardened to the possibility of us. "No, Mark, it's too late." He nodded, the sadness in his eyes deep, but I turned away, closing the door on what used to be. With Sarah out of the picture and my marriage over, I focused on rebuilding. Linda was my rock, supporting me through the last months of my pregnancy and the move to a new city. I found a new job in marketing again. The excitement of work a welcome return to my life. Balancing motherhood and a career wasn't easy, but I felt whole, my spirit mending. The day I gave birth to my daughter, I held her and felt an overwhelming sense of relief. She was beautiful, perfect, and mine. As I looked down at her tiny face, I promised her a life free from the shadows that had darkened mine. "Welcome to the world, little one. We're going to be just fine." And in that hospital room, holding my daughter, I knew I had not just survived, I had reclaimed my life. I had broken free from the chains of toxicity that had tried to bind me, and now I was finally free. That's the end of our story, folks. Now I have a question for you. Do you think Emily was justified in completely cutting off Mark, or should she have given him a chance to change after his initial support of his mother? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to like this video.